Noel said it the way he announced other things that had already been decided. Without looking at me, adjusting the collar of his jacket while the bellman stood 3 feet away pretending not to listen. Mum, I've moved Cecil and Winona into the lakefront suite. You're in 208 now. It's a perfectly nice room, south-facing. South-facing. As if that were a consolation. As if I had not booked the Birchwood suite 8 weeks earlier, because it had the walk-in shower, the grab bar beside the tub, and enough space for my daughter Tatum to stay with me if the weekend became what I already suspected it might. I looked past my son toward the lodge lobby, where my daughter-in-law Astrid stood beside her parents. Cecil and Winona had arrived with 4 pieces of matching luggage and the easy confidence of people who expected the best room in a building they had never paid for. "Did you move my belongings?" I asked. The staff handled it. Noel's voice was gentle in the way it became when he wanted me to let something go. "You're going to love 208. It overlooks the dock." I took the key card from the desk without argument. "All right," I said. "Let's see what comfortable means to you. My name is Florence Mackay. I was widowed 3 years ago, at 64, after 38 years of marriage to a man named Hugh, who believed that the best use of a good life was to leave something behind that mattered. We built a staffing agency together, Brightwood Staffing, that placed registered nurses, personal support workers, and dietary aides in long-term care homes across southwestern Ontario. Hugh managed the scheduling systems and the vehicle fleet. I managed the client relationships, the hiring, and what he used to call the human machinery, meaning the 400 workers who depended on us to treat them as people and not as filled shifts. We grew slowly, over 26 years. When larger corporate operators began acquiring smaller agencies, we had a decision to make. We sold Brightwood in the spring before Hugh's final illness. My share, after taxes and reinvestment, was just over $6 million. Noel knew we had sold well. He had no idea how well. Hugh and I had watched his cousin spend 12 years treating expected money as present money. Renovating a kitchen before the house was his, taking holidays on a line of credit that existed because a grandmother was still alive. We decided early that our finances would remain our own while we were living. That wasn't coldness. It was a lesson learned at someone else's expense. It did not mean I lived plainly. I kept the house in Waterloo, traveled twice a year, and gave to the causes Hugh had cared about. A regional hospice, a fund for PSWs pursuing continuing education. I helped Noel and Astrid with their down payment in Oakville. I covered 6 months of cash flow when Astrid's PR consultancy hit a difficult year. I helped with a portion of Cecil and Winona's dental costs one winter because the bills were real and the fear behind them was real. I did not do any of this to be thanked. I did expect it to be remembered when the word fairness came up. Noel and Astrid had been married 11 years. Astrid was intelligent and organized and fiercely devoted to her parents in a way I had once admired. Her father Cecil had worked in municipal planning. Her mother Winona had taught primary school. They had retired on pensions that were adequate but not generous, and when extra costs came, a furnace, a car repair, a medical bill, Noel and Astrid covered them. I helped occasionally. I understood why. What I did not understand was how that help had become invisible over time, replaced by something else. A feeling that I had more room than anyone needed. That generosity without limit was the least I could offer. Noel had begun to present every new request as a matter of equity. "You have more than you need," he would say. "They don't have the same options. You'd never even notice." I noticed everything. I just said yes for too long because I was afraid of what silence would cost me. My daughter Tatum was the person who made that hardest to ignore. She was 38, worked as an occupational therapist in Hamilton, and had a particular intolerance for the way her brother sometimes spoke on behalf of other people's feelings. She visited me without asking for anything except company. She brought groceries when my hip was acting up and didn't make it a production. She was also the only person in the family who asked what I wanted before assuming she already knew. Ridgecroft Lodge had come into my life 20 months earlier. It sat on a lake 40 minutes north of Huntsville, a 3-story stone and timber building from the 1940s, with wide verandas, a dining room that faced the water, and 12 guest rooms that had been slowly losing their dignity for 2 decades. The original family had sold it to a holding group that lacked the attention and the patience a place like this required. A property developer I had met through Hugh's estate work asked whether I might join a small ownership group. They knew I had run a service operation and understood older guests. I visited twice, walked the building carefully, and spoke to 3 staff members who had stayed through the transition. The lodge did not need to become fashionable. It needed structural repair, a proper commercial kitchen, accessible rooms that functioned the way they were described, and management that remembered why people drove 4 hours to be here. I invested $2.8 million and held 63% through my property holding company, Mackay Property Holdings. A smaller group held the rest. We hired a general manager, a man named Mr. Garland, who had spent 15 years running heritage inns in the Muskokas and understood the difference between rustic and neglected. We closed the East Wing for 4 months and renovated it properly. I asked that my ownership not appear in any guest-facing material. The staff knew me as Mrs. Mackay, the chairwoman who visited the kitchen and walked the accessible routes herself. Guests knew only that new owners had brought the lodge back. Noel knew I had money in a northern property. He asked once over dinner, seemed satisfied when I described it as a small investment in a renovation project, and returned to his phone. That incuriosity protected the arrangement better than any legal structure could have. The Thanksgiving weekend was Noel's idea, offered in a spirit I chose to believe was genuine. A family gathering over the long weekend in October. 3 nights, a private dinner Saturday, a guided canoe excursion Sunday. Cecil and Winona were coming up on their 40th wedding anniversary. Noel said Ridgecroft was exactly the kind of place everyone would enjoy. I called the lodge directly and booked through the group reservations line. The coordinator knew I was the majority owner. The booking was handled like any other family reservation. I reserved the Birchwood suite for myself. 2 rooms, an accessible bathroom, and a view of the water. A smaller lakefront room for Cecil and Winona, and nested rooms for Noel and Astrid and 2 other family members. My contribution to the weekend was $30,000 covering rooms, the private dinner, and the Sunday excursion. Noel was the named group contact because he had everyone's arrival details. The written agreement specified that any change to a confirmed guest room required that guest's direct approval. I sent Noel the room list and my confirmed budget. He replied with a thumbs up. 8 days before the weekend, Astrid called. She was pleasant in the way she became when she wanted something. Mum had been talking about this trip for weeks, she said, meaning Winona, the Birchwood suite. Could they have it? Just this once. It would mean so much, especially given the anniversary. I told her no. My hip had been giving me trouble since August, and the Birchwood had the accessible bathroom I needed. The room I had reserved for Cecil and Winona had a beautiful view and a perfectly serviceable bathroom on the ground floor, which would be easier on Cecil's knee replacement. Astrid became quiet in that particular way. It's their 40th, she said. It only happens once. The room I'd chosen for them was lovely, I said. The Birchwood was mine. She ended the call pleasantly. I recognized the pleasantness for what it was. 4 days later, the coordinator emailed me an updated rooming list. Cecil and Winona were now in the Birchwood suite. I had been moved to a room on the 2nd floor with a standard tub and a window overlooking the parking area. I called Noel. He laughed in the way he laughed at things he wanted me to think were small. Astrid was just trying different arrangements, he said. Nothing's finalized. My reservation was finalized. Fix it, I said. He did, and the coordinator confirmed. I told myself that was the end of it. It wasn't. The following week, Noel sent me a revised weekend estimate. It now included a spa package for Cecil and Winona, a private sunset boat cruise, and a Sunday's anniversary brunch with table decorations. The new total was $44,000. I told the coordinator my commitment was $30,000. Anything beyond that required separate payment from whoever was ordering it. Noel called within the hour. Why are you making this difficult over $14,000? I am not making anything difficult. I am keeping my gift within what I offered. He said I could easily cover it. That wasn't the point, and he knew it. I asked why his in-laws needed a private boat cruise on top of the canoe outing I had already arranged. He said Astrid wanted them to have something that felt truly special. Then Astrid is welcome to arrange it herself, I said. His voice went flat. Sometimes your generosity has so many conditions attached that it stops feeling like generosity. A gift with a limit is still a gift, I said. He hung up. I didn't hear from Tatum until the Tuesday before the trip. She had driven up to help me pack and found me organizing medications, including the anti-inflammatory my doctor had recently prescribed for my hip. Dad told everyone at dinner on Sunday that you'd sorted the room situation out, she said. He said you'd realized the Birchwood was more than you needed. I stopped folding a sweater. When was this dinner? Sunday. He told the whole table. He made it sound like you'd called the lodge yourself. I had called no one. I had said no twice and confirmed my original reservation once. Noel was no longer adjusting a room. He was building a version of events in which I had already agreed. Tatum offered to call her brother right then. I asked her not to. Not yet, but what she'd said stayed with me through the evening. The word forgetful passed through my mind. I pushed it aside, but it lodged somewhere it hadn't been before. The following morning, I called Mr. Garland directly. He told me something he had been uncertain whether to raise. Noel had emailed the coordinator a second time. He wrote that I had been experiencing some confusion and fatigues since a fall in the spring. There had been no fall, only the ongoing hip trouble, and that he had taken on responsibility for decisions on my behalf during this difficult period. He asked the staff not to burden me with booking details. Mr. Garland had not acted on that request. He had restored the original room list and asked Noel for written confirmation from me directly. Noel had replied from the family group email address with a single line. Florence has agreed to the revised arrangements. That message did not come from me. The coordinator had been managing a full lodge and a group organizer who presented himself as acting with authority. She accepted the message because Noel was the named contact. Mr. Garland had caught it that afternoon and restored my room. He apologized. I told him the coordinator was not at fault. Noel had manufactured the impression, and we would look at the process together after the weekend. Then I made a decision. Leave the current system as it stands until I arrive. Don't correct it proactively. Mr. Garland hesitated. Mrs. Mackay, I can restore your suite right now. I know. I want to hear my son explain the change to my face while he believes the lodge has accepted his authority. This was not a trap built from nothing. Noel had dismissed my refusal twice, told our family I had agreed to something I hadn't, and written a false medical claim to a business I owned. I needed to see whether he would tell me the truth when we were standing in the same room. I also asked Mr. Garland to remove my account guarantee from anything beyond the original booking. The 30,000 covered rooms and the Saturday dinner, spa packages, boat tours, and anniversary brunches would require another card at the time of request. We arrived at Ridgecroft on the Friday afternoon. The lodge smelled of cedar smoke and lake air. The October light came through the tall windows in long, low angles that Hugh had always loved about this time of year. A fire was going in the dining room, and a few guests were having tea near the window, watching the loons on the water. Noel and Astrid were already at the desk. Cecil and Winona stood near the staircase with small anniversary ribbon pins that Astrid had made up for the weekend. They looked genuinely happy to be somewhere beautiful. I gave my name at the desk. The clerk glanced toward Mr. Garland, who was standing near the hearth. He gave the smallest nod. She handed me a key card for room 208. I turned to Noel. That was when he told me his in-laws needed the suite more than I did. He said it without flinching, the way you might explain a seating change at a dinner table. He told me not to make the lobby uncomfortable. He told me 208 was south-facing. I asked whether he had moved my belongings. He said the staff had handled it, though I had not yet checked in. What he meant was that the system had been changed. He had done the rest by phone and email from Oakville. I accepted the key. All right, I said. Let's see how comfortable you intended my weekend to be. Tatum had arrived 20 minutes behind me. She read the lobby quickly, took my overnight bag from the bellman without asking, and stayed beside me as we crossed to the elevator. Astrid caught up with us at the doors. Florence, she said, thank you for being so understanding about all of this. What am I understanding exactly? She lowered her voice. Mum and Dad have spent 40 years putting everyone else first. One night in the best room isn't too much. Did Noel tell you I agreed to this? She looked briefly toward the window. He said you'd see how much it meant once you arrived. That was not the same story he had told the lodge. I asked whether Cecil and Winona knew the suite had originally been mine. They know there was a room change, she said. They think you chose to move. Her silence answered the rest. Room 208 was clean and adequately furnished. It overlooked the parking terrace, not the lake. The bathroom had a standard tub with no grab bar. The welcome card on the desk had a different guest's name on the envelope. Evidence of a last-minute change creating errors downstream. Tatum examined the tub. She was an occupational therapist. She didn't need to say anything. I know, I said. She reached for her phone. I'm calling Noel. Not yet. I sat by the window and took the weight off my hip. I told her I had a connection to this property and that the manager was already aware of the problem. I did not reveal ownership yet. She deserved honesty, but I needed her reaction at dinner to be unscripted. Can they move you back tonight? She asked. They can restore the original booking at any time. Then, why are you waiting? Because your brother has told 3 different stories to 3 different people. I want him to choose one in front of everyone. At 5:30, a fruit basket arrived with a card from Noel and Astrid. Thank you for your flexibility, family first. Flexibility. I had not been flexible. My reservation had been taken and then reframed in softer language. A sacrifice named by someone other than the person's making it is simply a taking. I wore a dark green blazer to the welcome gathering in the dining room and used my cane. Cecil and Winona thanked me the moment I walked in. Winona said the suite was beyond anything they had imagined. Cecil said Noel had told them I insisted they have it. I looked across the room at my son. He was watching. Did he? I said. Cecil smiled warmly. He said it was your way of making their anniversary feel truly celebrated. I chose not to correct them there. They were gracious people who had been given a story to inhabit. I was not going to humiliate them for something they hadn't created. But Noel relaxed when I said nothing. That silence taught him the wrong thing again. Later, a server brought me a glass of Niagara Riesling I had specifically requested. Astrid intercepted him. Florence doesn't drink when she's on her hip medication, she told him, in front of two of Noel's cousins. There is no alcohol restriction with my medication, I said. This is my wine, and I will decide whether to drink it. Astrid laughed lightly for the benefit of the cousins. She's very particular about these things. Noel appeared at her side. Mum, she's just looking out for you. I didn't ask to be looked out for. One cousin looked at the floor. I understood the picture Noel was constructing. Patient son, attentive wife, difficult mother who turned every kindness into a confrontation. It was a tidy story if you only heard one side of it. Mr. Garland approached before the gathering ended and asked to speak with me privately. Noel moved to intercept. She can deal with lodge matters through me this weekend. Mr. Garland kept his attention on me. This requires Mrs. Mackay directly. In the reading room off the lobby, he showed me the master account. Noel had attempted to add the boat cruise, spa package, and anniversary brunch within hours of arrival. When the desk asked for a card, he said the group owner would cover everything. The coordinator had declined because my written limit remained on file. He had also left a handwritten note at the front desk, asking that all matters involving me be routed through him, due to occasional confusion when she is fatigued. I asked Mr. Garland to print 3 documents. My original confirmation. Noel's email claiming I had agreed to the room change. The current account showing declined additions. He placed them in a plain envelope. Would you like us to restore your suite tonight? After the Saturday dinner, I said, and I gave him one more instruction. Whatever happened at that table, the anniversary dinner would proceed exactly as I had arranged and paid for it. Cecil and Winona would not lose a meal or a celebration because of their son-in-law's conduct. That was not negotiable. The Saturday dinner was set in the Muskoka room, the long table facing the lake. Someone had arranged small gourds along the windowsill and lit birch candles along the center. The dining room manager had surprised us with a Thanksgiving pudding and maple cream. It could have been a beautiful evening. Noel gave a toast. He thanked Astrid, the staff, and Cecil and Winona's 40 years together. He said a word or two about family. He did not mention me. Tatum was beside me. She noticed when I shifted in my chair, trying to ease the pressure on my hip. The walk from the elevator to this dining room was longer than it would have been from the Birchwood suite. Across the table, Astrid told a story about her parents always giving more than they received. Cecil said he still felt a little guilty about the room. Noel had made it sound like Florence truly wanted them there, he said. I put down my fork. Astrid, I said, what condition do you believe I have? She looked startled. I didn't say you had a condition. You told the gathering last night I can't drink on my medication. Noel told the lodge I have memory problems. What exactly are you claiming about me? Noel leaned forward. This isn't the time for this. You made it the time when you used that claim to take my room. Winona set down her glass and looked at her husband, then at Noel. We were told Florence offered us the suite. She was going to, Noel said. We'd discussed it. We discussed it when Astrid asked, and I said no, I said. The birch candles continued burning. Beyond the windows, the Thanksgiving lake sat dark and still under an October sky. Cecil looked at his son-in-law. Noel, did your mother agree to this? I rearranged a room, Noel said. I didn't put anyone in danger. Mum has a perfectly comfortable room. I reached for the envelope under my chair and placed the printed account on the table. The boat cruise, spa package, and anniversary brunch editions were listed in order. All declined when a card was requested. Noel pushed the paper aside. You always find a way to make money the subject. You made it the subject when you tried to spend $14,000 past my limit. Tatum spoke quietly. She said no twice before we left home. You changed the reservation anyway. Who is actually managing this weekend? Noel told her she was too young to understand how families with different financial situations had to work. Cecil replied, she seems to understand this one well enough. Dessert sat untouched. A Thanksgiving pudding going cold while the room decided what kind of evening this was going to be. Noel tried to recover. He stood and spoke about those who had more, making room for those with less. He said real family love didn't keep score. It was the kind of speech that would have meant something if it hadn't been built on a displaced grab bar and a forged reply. When he finished, I remained in my chair. "There is one more voice that should be heard tonight," I said. Mr. Garland entered at my signal. Noel frowned. "We don't need the general manager at a family dinner." Mr. Garland stopped beside my chair. "Mrs. Mackay asked me to confirm a few facts regarding the reservation." Noel looked at me. "What facts?" I placed my original suite confirmation beside his email to the coordinator. The Birchwood suite was booked in my name. "You told the lodge I had authorized the change because I'd been experiencing confusion." "I made no such authorization." "I was the group contact," Noel said. "I made a logistical call." Mr. Garland spoke plainly. "A group contact manages arrivals and schedules. He may not override a confirmed guest's room after she has refused the change in person. We should have called Mrs. Mackay before accepting the second message. That is a process failure we are correcting." Noel asked why lodge business was being raised at a family dinner. "Because I requested it," I said. "You are a guest at Ridgecroft. I am also the majority owner." The room went quiet in the particular way. Rooms go quiet when the ground shifts under everyone at once. Astrid set down her fork. Winona put her hand to her chest. Noel stared at me, as though the chair beneath him had become something unfamiliar. "What?" Mr. Garland confirmed what needed confirming. Mrs. Mackay's holding company owns 63% of Ridgecroft Lodge. She chairs the ownership group. Noel looked at the manager, then around the table, then back at me. "You own this lodge. I told you I had an investment in a northern property. You never asked which one." Astrid found her voice. "Did you plan this entire weekend to test us?" "No. I arranged a Thanksgiving gathering at a lodge I own. You asked for my room, I refused. Noel changed the reservation anyway and told the staff I was losing my clarity." Cecil's face had gone pale. He looked at his daughter, then at his son-in-law. "We didn't know any of this." "I believe you," I said. He said, "We'll move out of the suite tonight." I told him he and Winona could go into the lakefront room I had originally reserved for them. Mr. Garland had kept it available during the shuffle. They would not be put somewhere inadequate. They would have exactly what I had chosen and paid for from the beginning. Noel pushed back from the table. "You're displacing two people in the middle of their anniversary weekend. I am restoring the reservations I made." Winona looked at her son-in-law. "Stop. We did not ask you to lie for us." Astrid was crying. She said she had only wanted her parents to have something extraordinary for once. She said watching them walk into that suite had felt like finally being able to give them something they deserved. I understood that feeling completely. I did not accept the method. "You could have paid for an upgrade yourself," I said. "You could have chosen a different weekend or a different lodge. You could have accepted my no. Instead, you made your gift to them out of something taken from me." Mr. Garland asked whether I wanted Noel's group authority removed from the account. I told him yes. From that moment, each adult was responsible for decisions about their own room only. My account covered the original reservations and the dinner. Everything else required a separate card. The boat cruise was released. The spa bookings were voided unless Noel or Astrid provided their own payment. The brunch table was cancelled. The control Noel had quietly assembled over the weekend dissolved at the dinner table. The Birchwood suite was restored by 9:30. My suitcase stood inside the bedroom door. The loons had gone quiet on the lake. Cecil and Winona were moved to their lakefront room with fresh flowers and a new card from the kitchen. Their anniversary was not dismantled. It was simply no longer constructed on a lie. In the corridor afterward, Noel found me. "You humiliated me in front of my in-laws," he said. I stopped beside the window overlooking the dark water. "I gave you several chances to tell the truth before Mr. Garland came in. You could have handled this privately. I tried twice before we left home. You told the family I had agreed." He was quiet. "I only wanted Astrid's parents to feel like the weekend was theirs. You cannot make it theirs by making it no longer mine." Tatum was waiting at the end of the hall. I walked toward her. The next morning I woke before the light was fully over the lake. I made tea and sat on the small balcony that faced east. The water was silver and still. Tatum knocked at 7. She looked like she hadn't slept well. "Dad says you kept the ownership hidden, so you could catch him doing something wrong," she said. "What do you think?" She considered the question seriously. "I think he would have done exactly the same thing if you were just a regular guest." That was the painful truth. Owning the lodge had made my correction possible. It had not made the original wrong more real. Noel had dismissed my refusal and manufactured a medical story before he knew I held any authority here. At breakfast, Cecil came to my table alone. He sat down without asking, which I found I appreciated. "We should have come to you ourselves," he said. "The suite was beautiful, and we wanted to believe we deserved it. That's on us too." That kind of honesty was worth something. I accepted it. Noel and Astrid skipped breakfast and left before the canoe excursion. Their room showed no damage. Their own incidentals had been paid. They said nothing on their way out. Noel sent a message to the family group an hour later, saying I had used the lodge staff to humiliate him at a private family celebration, and that my secret ownership proved the weekend had been a calculated ambush. Tatum replied with one sentence. "Mum said no before we left home. Noel changed the room anyway." She left it at that. It was enough. That afternoon, Mr. Garland told me Noel had made one more attempt before leaving. He had called the front desk and asked them to cancel the remaining family rooms and refund the unused nights to him as group organizer. The request failed. Had paid the deposit and the guests were already checked in. The lodge followed the booking agreement. Noel had tried to exercise authority he no longer held. I told Mr. Garland to keep all rooms available through Monday checkout. No relative would be pressured to leave because Noel was angry. The Sunday canoe excursion went ahead. Cecil and Winona came. Tatum came. 6 other relatives paddled out in the October air while the leaves along the shore ran red and gold. Cecil stood beside me at the dock afterward. "Noel has always wanted to fix things for us," he said. "Sometimes we let him because it felt good to be chosen. Being chosen shouldn't require someone else to be removed from their own booking." He nodded. We didn't speak about money again. That evening, Noel came to the Birchwood suite alone. I let him in. I wanted one private conversation without an audience. He stood near the window and looked at the lake for a long moment. "I understand why they wanted it," he said. "That isn't an apology." He turned. "What do you want me to say? That I moved a room? Fine, I moved a room. You told the lodge I had memory problems. They needed a reason to accept the change. So you invented one." He said hotels and lodges made exceptions for group organizers all the time. He said no real harm had been done because I'd still had a room. I asked how he would have reacted if a stranger had moved his mother-in-law into an inaccessible bathroom after she had refused. He looked away. "That's different." "What makes it different?" He had no answer he could say aloud. Then his real purpose for being there appeared. He asked whether Ridgecroft would eventually be part of my estate. Something closed inside me. He had learned I owned the lodge less than 24 hours ago. Already the thought had become forward-looking. "Why are you asking?" "Because Astrid and I should understand the family assets. We could contribute here. Her communications background, my operations experience." He spoke as though an opportunity had opened where a lesson should have been. "Neither of you will have a role in this lodge," I said. "You can't decide that forever. While I'm alive, I can decide it today." He left without saying goodnight. The Monday checkout was quiet. Cecil and Winona paid their own incidentals and thanked me a second time. Other relatives left normally. The lodge completed its obligations to every guest. The week after I returned to Waterloo, I met with my solicitor, Ms. Ostrowski. My existing will gave Noel the bulk of my investment accounts and a partial interest in Mackay Property Holdings. Tatum had a separate trust. When the will was written, Ridgecroft did not yet exist in my portfolio. Under the current structure, Noel could eventually influence decisions about the lodge. I thought about the first question he had asked in my suite. I thought about how quickly revelation had turned to inventory. I did not change the will in anger. I changed it after reviewing consequences. The lodge shares moved into a separately managed trust with a mandate to maintain the accessibility standards, protect the staffing structure, and prevent a quick sale for personal gain. Noel would receive a fair annual income from the trust. He would hold no operational authority and could not appoint himself or Astrid in any capacity. Tatum's share of the remaining estate increased. An advisory board role was available to her when her experience and the trust's governance process supported it, the same process anyone else would follow. The remaining wealth, beyond the family provisions, would fund a continuing education endowment for personal support workers across Ontario and a renovation grant program for small rural inns undertaking genuine accessibility upgrades, the kind of work that didn't attract headlines because it wasn't fashionable. Ms. Ostrowski asked whether I wanted the will to reference Noel's conduct at Ridgecroft. "No," I said. "The structure should solve the problem without delivering a verdict after I'm gone." I waited 2 weeks before signing. During that time, I had a routine appointment with my physician. My memory and judgment were not in question, but I asked for a current note in my file. A document Noel's invented story could not grow into. If it was ever repeated somewhere, it might be believed. Then, I signed. Noel's version of the weekend spread to a few relatives who hadn't been at the Saturday dinner. He said I had displaced 2 elderly people from a suite in the middle of their anniversary and used the lodge staff to do it. I invited Noel, Astrid, and those relatives to my house in Waterloo. Tatum came because she had witnessed everything and because Noel had included her in his accusations. On the dining table, I placed 3 documents: the original Birchwood confirmation in my name, Noel's email to the coordinator stating I had agreed, his note to the front desk about my confusion. "Read these," I said. They did. One relative asked Noel why he hadn't simply upgraded his in-laws at his own expense on a different weekend. "Because this anniversary only happens once," he said. "Your mother saying no also only happened once," the relative said. "More than once, actually." Noel's family version of events met the documents and stopped. I told him the lodge ownership was now in a trust and would remain there. His position in my estate had changed from direct control to managed income. He stared at the table. "You changed your will over a room reassignment." "I changed it because you dismissed my refusal, wrote a false medical claim to the front desk, and asked about inheriting the lodge before you said you were sorry." Astrid sent a written letter 3 weeks later. She said she should not have implied I needed managing in front of family. She acknowledged the room had been mine. She said she was sorry for accepting what she should have questioned. I wrote back and accepted the apology. I did not restore financial privileges. Courtesy returned before trust had any reason to. Noel called through the winter. The early calls were arguments about the will. When I ended those calmly, they shifted. By February, he was calling to describe a difficult client. By March, he asked how my hip was healing. In April, he drove me to a physiotherapy appointment in Hamilton and waited in the lobby. When the therapist gave her assessment, Noel didn't answer for me. He sat in the chair beside mine and listened. Those ordinary moments mattered more than anything that could have been said in a lodge corridor. Tatum came to Ridgecroft with me the following July. We stayed 2 nights in the Birchwood suite and had dinner on the veranda in the long summer light. The loons were out on the water. Hugh would have named every bird in order and then looked pleased with himself. There was no room list to manage that evening, no one needing the better view more than someone else. That was the first picture of the life I was building. The second came in the autumn, when the Continuing Education Fund made its first round of grants. 6 personal support workers enrolled in supervisor certification courses. One of them had been a dietary aide at a long-term care facilities we'd staffed through Brightwood years ago. She sent a handwritten note that began, "I never thought anyone would pay for this." Hugh would have put that note on the refrigerator door with a magnet shaped like a maple leaf and left it there until it faded. My money had stopped being something people negotiated around me. It had become what it was always supposed to be, a way of opening doors wide enough for others to walk through safely. Respect costs nothing to give, but once you stop financing its absence, you realize how little you were ever buying with all that silence.